Testing.
You're coming in loud and clear, thank you. Ready for countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome. Welcome to our final session of this first international symposium on the role of consciousness in solving the world's problems and making life work for everyone. I'm John Hagelin, quantum physicist, president of Maharishi International University, and your host for this morning's conference. This has been a most extraordinary week, an historic week, I would say, providing such profound knowledge by such exceptional experts and speakers, and profoundly practical knowledge with respect to today's problems and challenges, which are, of course, pervasive. I am particularly excited about this morning's session, and I think our global audience has been very much anticipating this last session in this series, which is dedicated to experiences of higher states of consciousness throughout time and today. I will now introduce our three panelists, followed by our keynote speaker and conference chair, Dr. Tony Nader. There could be no more qualified people on this planet to discuss today's topics on higher states of consciousness, in addition to Dr. Tony Nader, starting with Dr. Bevan Morris, one of the world's leading experts on Maharishi's science and technology of consciousness. Having worked closely with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for more than 40 years, he was the president of Maharishi International University for 36 years and built MIU into what it is today. A key executive in the worldwide organization founded by Maharishi, he has presented Maharishi's programs for the development of consciousness to leaders in more than 100 countries throughout the world. Dr. Fred Travis, to my far right, is MIU's director of the Center for Brain, Consciousness, and Cognition and chair of MIU's Department of Maharishi Vedic Science of Consciousness, and the world's most widely published researcher on how brain functioning changes with the experience of pure consciousness and still higher states of consciousness. He has done tremendous work in this area. And then finally, in the middle to my right, Dr. Craig Pearson, our Vice President of Academic Affairs of Maharishi International University. Dr. Pearson, Craig, is a prolific and wonderful author, including author of a truly remarkable book entitled The Supreme Awakening. In fact, I have a copy here. The Supreme Awakening, Experiences of Higher States of Consciousness Throughout Time, and How You Can Cultivate Them. This book is used as a core text in some of our most popular courses at MIU and has been well received and deeply appreciated by readers all across the world. And then our keynote speaker and conference chair, Dr. Tony Nader, MD, PhD. He is, as we've mentioned, an esteemed neuroscientist and medical doctor, and medical researcher as well, trained at Harvard University and MIT. He is a world authority in the science of consciousness, and that includes higher states of consciousness. He is author of the truly transformative book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, which I think is critical to laying out the future direction of humankind as we see it. Dr. Nader is also a globally renowned Vedic scholar who worked intimately and under the guidance of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, world-renowned Vedic scientist and sage, and also international director of the Transcendental Meditation organizations in over 100 countries throughout the world, who oversees and directs the extremely important practical applications of the science of consciousness in all areas of national life. research surveys show that nearly half of the American people say they have had a mystical or religious experience defined by a moment of sudden awakening, or religious or spiritual insight, or a connection to something much larger than themselves. And that trend is increasing. These experiences of higher consciousness seem to bring important benefits, including higher levels of life satisfaction, higher levels of gratitude, and increased well-being. Indeed, as a matter of fact, in these recent years, many hundreds of published studies on TM link the experience of unbounded awareness, or samadhi if you wish, to accelerated brain development, higher IQ, increased creativity, and improved academic performance, executive functioning, emotional development, empathy, compassion, and such, and to substantial health benefits. So what are these higher states of consciousness? What is their core purpose? What is their value? And what may be driving this global trend of increased spiritual awakening? There is a great deal to discuss today, so might I recommend that our panelists speak succinctly in your opening remarks, saving plenty of time for a robust back and forth dialogue that will bring out many points in shorter, more engaging, digestible bites. We could start by hitting a few key points, and then we'll all move forward to a substantive and lively dialogue. Dr. Nader, as our conference chair, let me call on you first to begin this fascinating dialogue and set the direction for a discussion on higher states of consciousness. And please take as long as you would like.
Thank you, President Higlen, and the great panelists that are assembled today. I look forward to a fascinating...
You may be muted, Dr. Nader.
No, I'm not. I don't know that I'm muted. I'm fine.
Not yet. Not hearing yet. Let's see. Can we check in the control room? I don't think that's Dr. Nader.
No, it's not me.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
So it was from your side, I guess, because I didn't do anything. Is it working now?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Dr. Nader.
Wonderful. I was just thanking you and the panelists, which really announces a wonderful session that I'm looking very much forward to. And I would love certainly to make some comments, because states of consciousness relate to consciousness experience and how we experience ourselves and the outer world, as will be discussed. I'm not going to go through all of this, just to give the opportunity also to our panelists to describe the different states of consciousness if they wish. I'd like just to highlight something very important, that consciousness is not just something mental, which means that we experience on our level of awareness the consciousness of an object, the consciousness of a thought, the consciousness of a feeling, and therefore somehow these are disconnected from the environment, disconnected from the object, and even disconnected from our physiology. Because when we will be discussing states of consciousness, we have to realize that a state of consciousness is the outcome of a large number of factors, including mind, of course, intellect, ego, sense of who we are, but also physiology. So the physiology plays an important role in how we experience consciousness. In our paradigm, the physiology itself is an expression of consciousness. And the adjustment and organization of these different aspects of the physiology lead to either a clearer consciousness, or the way they work and they combine together leads to a different quality of consciousness. The way they function together leads to a different quality of consciousness. So one of the primary and most important aspects of realizing what consciousness is and how consciousness manifests and what it is reflecting is to take into consideration the fact that all that we are, all that we have accumulated in our physiology for whatever physiology you consider is, even if we consider it from a material perspective, which in our paradigm it is not. It is just an expression of a certain perception, a certain ability to perceive from a certain point of view the expression of consciousness. So all these perspectives on reality, perspectives on matter, perspective on physical, perspective on the universe, are just that, actually, perspectives. They are expressions of consciousness interacting with itself and having this infinite number of possibilities that then can include small possibilities, big possibilities, large possibilities. So this is one point. The other point is these aspects of consciousness, and in particular the higher states of consciousness, but any aspect of consciousness has its importance not only as an experience, which by itself is great, but also in terms of its outcome as activity, as productivity, as purposefulness in our life for ourselves and for others. So it is not something that is to be just enjoyed, that I have something philosophical or mental or a sudden type of experience, and that's what it is. The implications of higher states of consciousness in terms of our ability to think correctly, plan correctly, be creative, discover things in the outside world, understand the laws of nature as we do in science, do experiments, build up a life that is better for everybody. And as we have discussed throughout the symposium, its effects on health, its effects on creativity, on economy, on defense, on politics, on social life, on the climate, on the environment, is also very important. So we're not talking about something that one has on an abstract level and that's where it stops. Now, having said that, we should realize that we live our lives through consciousness. So the experience of consciousness, of the quality and colors of consciousness, is very important because the same objects can be around and some people can see them from an angle that is uplifting. They can find in them, in the objects or in the situation that one exposes oneself to, one can find solutions, one can find alternatives of other things, one can find opportunities. Another person with the same circumstances, based on their perspective, they might not be able to see the same opportunities. They might not be able to use those opportunities in the best possible way. And that depends on their state of consciousness. So consciousness is something which is very practical. And also, as we live our life through consciousness, ultimately, what matters most is the color of our consciousness as we go along. If somebody is extremely happy, feeling enlightened, feeling at peace with themselves, and feeling with broad comprehension, and are able to guide others, but they miss having certain parameters, such as maybe a beautiful house or a beautiful car or whatever, but they still have that infinity, that feeling of peace and creativity, that happiness and bliss within. What does it matter really that the objects of the outside are changing or can be changed? So ultimately, we have to realize this because our material world, our physical material world, concentrates a lot on the objective value, on assessing things through objectivity. We do this in science because we say we don't want the subjectivity of the individual to interfere with the findings so that we can have true results. And therefore, subjectivity has been discarded as if it's something unreliable. Now, it might be unreliable on the surface level for others, but if somebody is truly living in a feeling of bliss or a feeling of happiness, feeling of joy over a long period of time and actually established forever for good, then what else really makes more sense or is more important? Now, of course, fleeting moments of such experiences can come and go, and then they have their own value, maybe to give the taste of what the possibilities are, but they are not the ideal situation. And we know that people, they take things, they go through experiments on different levels, and they can have all kinds of things. It could be described in medical terms as a hallucination or a special state of consciousness during one moment or another. And what differentiates this from the higher states of consciousness that we are talking about is the longevity of this experience, the stability of these experiences, and the productivity and balance that the individual who is having this experience is producing, and their state of health, their state of well-being, their creativity in business, their leadership ability. So to have an experience is something, but to have a permanent, stable experience in a natural, holistic way with no side effects and able to use that experience for the benefit of one's own health, one's own well-being, one's own creativity, one's activity in society, and prolong that in society and use it for great leadership and creation of happiness and health and prosperity for the others is a different thing. So there is the experience, there is the stability of the experience and its effectiveness and its practical value that is very important. So these are some highlights, but we'd like to hear from the great experts and panelists of their experiences and the experiences they like to share with us. And if there is a chance, because there has been some questions that have come about the paradigm of consciousness and how the combination problem in panpsychism can be resolved. We haven't highlighted that, but because that's a little bit theoretical, but we have a solution to that for those who are in the philosophy arena and the science and philosophy of consciousness. The idea that elements combine to create a higher consciousness is problematic for some reasons that they describe. And a question has come from particularly Dr. Tompkins, who is a great expert in consciousness himself, and he has been in this arena, and he wanted me to comment on that. But I'll hold on to this until President Hagelin tells us that maybe it's relevant and the time has come to discuss it.
Hall speakers completely right now, 100% off in the hall, please. 100% off, please, in the hall. All sort of noise coming through the Dolby Hall audio-video system. So while the three of us are speaking in Dolby Hall, we can hear ourselves perfectly well, and I hope others can hear us as well. Thank you very much for those opening remarks. That was a beautiful positioning statement. Wonderful to hear you speak on higher states of consciousness. And what I'd like to do first here on the panel, for a little bit of historical perspective, is introduce Dr. Craig Pearson, who has written this really comprehensive book on higher states of consciousness throughout the ages, The Supreme Awakening, to give us a little context for these experiences, both throughout time and today. And do take a little time to unfold that for us, and then we'll invite our other great experts to speak as well. Dr. Pierce.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hagelin. Throughout history and throughout the world, great poets and philosophers and saints and explorers and scientists and artists have described unique experiences that just reading them you feel they are in some way different from our ordinary waking experience. And there have been some people who've taken note of these experiences. Usually they just call attention to the experience as some kind of nice moment. There are a few scholars at the periphery of scholarship who've looked more seriously at what's sometimes called mystical experiences. There's a lot of discussion about that among this very small cadre of people, again, at the kind of outskirts of scholarship, debate about what these experiences even mean, what's their significance, where do they come from. And what Maharshi's given us in his Science and Technology of Consciousness is a framework for understanding higher human development beyond the ordinary waking state. And if I could just make this personal for a moment, I remember when I was a boy, my father mentioned to me just this point that some scientists feel we only use a small percentage of our full potential. And just even as a boy, that struck me as so odd. How could we have this potential and not use it? And further reflection, I thought, if there is higher potential, even much higher potential, that higher potential must involve some kind of quite different experience of ourselves and experience of our environment. And then when I found Maharshi and learned transcendental meditation and learned about this model, it struck me that in this model of higher states is a prediction. If these experiences are indeed natural, as Maharshi indicates that they are, if they are natural stages of higher human development, then we can take this as a hypothesis. We could look back through the annals of history and see if, in fact, people have described experiences in that direction, even momentary experiences, if not the stabilized state, which is the fully developed form of the experience. So I took that on as a project and just read and read and read everything that I could get my hands on in different traditions, different literatures, different wisdom and philosophical and religious traditions. And sure enough, the prediction holds that people in all walks of life have described experiences that very closely match Maharshi's description of higher human development, which some of our speakers in this session will describe in more detail. And this is really a great contribution to understanding these people, because here they were trying their best with words. Words are the expression of the ordinary waking state. They are, by definition, kind of divisive. They single out specifically objective things in the world that we talk about. And when you come across these experiences, these descriptions from these people, very often they'll say something like, I've done my best to describe this, but my words just don't do justice. Words cannot capture. In fact, the playwright Eugene Ionesco said that even his words disfigure the experience. Nonetheless, the experiences were so striking in so many cases that they would often consider these to be the moments of their life, the touchstones by which every other experience in their life would be measured. Some of them wished later in life they could have had that experience again, that one transformative glimpse of some higher states. So again, throughout history, throughout time, from people of all different professions, not just saints, not just mystics, but practical people, scientists, artists, and so on, as I've said, have described experiences like this, sometimes momentary, sometimes in a stable state. Some of these people were part of what we might call a contemplative tradition, so they had a practice of meditation or prayer. Other people had no such tradition. The experiences came on spontaneously, which we can understand by realizing that these experiences of higher states are really natural to human physiology. When, as we'll learn later from Dr. Travis, when human physiology, when the human brain is functioning the way it's designed to function, then that integrated normal style of functioning supports the experiences that human beings were designed to have, which is the experience of their higher human potentials. And Maharshi's model of 7 states of consciousness, including 4 higher states, gives us signposts for what we can look for as higher human development unfolds and progresses. And it gives us a way of evaluating the experiences that we find littered like golden nuggets throughout the river of history that we can look back now and appreciate with even greater depth, knowing that there's this understanding and, even more importantly, a technique for having those experiences oneself. And I would just add that with that technique to have the experiences oneself, then those words of these great figures through history who've described these experiences, then those words really sing. They really light up. You read these passages and you go, yes, I know what that person is talking about. Even if you may not have had the experience of the higher state that they're describing, nonetheless, there's a resonance. Yes, I get that. So that is a real boon to be able to grow in those higher states ourselves with all of the great benefits that brings. But that gives us the broader comprehension and the firsthand experience, at least the beginnings of it, to appreciate what some of the great geniuses in all the different professions through history have been trying to tell us, and those messages that have come down to us through these centuries.
Thank you very much, Craig, for that and your incredible historical work in this area. I'm drawn to make one comment that comes to mind. As Maharshi has clarified and really explained explicitly and systematically many times over many years, and as Dr. Nader has been already laying out for us, Maharshi has described a sequential unfoldment of human potential beyond the 3 waking states that everybody experiences: waking, dreaming, deep sleep. A systematic unfoldment with milestones of development, the first of those being the experience of pure consciousness, which is accessible and easy for everyone with proper guidance, with a proper technique. Transcendental meditation, certainly in this time in history, maybe for any time in history, is the most direct and effective technique for experiencing samadhi, pure consciousness, the 4th state of consciousness. But beyond that, the stabilization of that state 24 hours a day and night is called cosmic consciousness. The profound enrichment of that state to extend towards our outer experience of life, not just the inner experience of consciousness, but our outer sensory world and perception of reality, profoundly enriched in glorified cosmic consciousness or God consciousness, and then in unity consciousness, the ultimate level, stage of human development, where the scientific truth of the unity of everyone and everything becomes a living, breathing reality in daily life. So each of these different levels of consciousness have quite their own reality, their own natural logic, their own natural language. It's just a completely different, hierarchically expansive and complete understanding and experience of reality. From deep sleep to unity consciousness, where all of this is seen to be, explicitly seen to be nothing other than the play and display of eternal universal consciousness. And speaking once, and this is my point, to a very distinguished, revered, older Indian philosopher once on a journey there, someone who really appreciated Maharshi Mahesh Yogi and his teacher, Gurudev, for their remarkable accomplishments in bringing these experiences out to millions of people across the world, and discussing that a little bit back and forth. He stressed a point that took me a little bit by surprise. He said, for me as a philosopher, the most important thing that Maharshi has done that is so unique and unprecedented in the whole literature of yoga, the whole literature of Veda, is he cut through, he said, the Tower of Babel of discourse, of people speaking from different states of consciousness, somebody from waking consciousness, somebody from cosmic consciousness, somebody from God consciousness, somebody from unity consciousness, all expounding exquisite and uplifting truths about reality, but having nothing in common. they were saying things that seemed to be contradictory to each other, and making sense of the spiritual literature of almost any tradition in the world today is difficult, because while there's some parallels between what these great seers say and report, there are also profound differences, striking differences in their ultimate conclusions. So who's right? And is there really anything that can be, I think, trusted in these different experiences? And Maharishi actually put them in their natural hierarchy of unfoldment, and there's no contradiction between them. It's just that one is a more partial description of the ultimate reality, another more complete, unity consciousness, the most complete. It's the unity consciousness perspective really that comes through, I think, most when Dr. Tony Nader speaks and writes, because from that natural state, that's how you see the world in its full completeness. So that cutting through the Tower of Babel, so to speak, by identifying and describing lucidly, Maharishi did, these stages of unfoldment of human growth, human development to higher states of consciousness, he's made the indecipherable world of, say, scriptural, spiritual literature not only decipherable, but really easily comprehensible. And without that framework of knowledge, frankly, it's difficult, and I think sometimes even discouraging, to try to read and understand some of the spiritual literature of humanity. But with that aside, I think perhaps Dr. Fred Travis, as a fantastic neurophysiologist and researcher on higher states of consciousness, can help bring home the idea that this is not fanciful thinking. This is the natural development of the actual brain physiology that results from regular experience of pure consciousness. Dr. Fred Travis.
Thank you, Dr. Hagelin. My pleasure to be here. Higher states of consciousness. Maharishi in the video, Perception and Cognition in Higher States, says this: higher states of consciousness are nothing other than different values of our own experiences from day to day. Different values of our own experiences from day to day. Our experiences, we know, are made up of knower and known, tied together with process of knowing, which Dr. Nader describes as bits of consciousness. And as a quality of knower, quality of known changes, so the quality of bits of consciousness change. And Dr. Nader brought up the important point that what links the knower and the known is key. And what links the knower and the knower is physiological functioning. As Dr. Nader just laid out, the physiology is the interface between us and the environment. And that higher states of consciousness are not fanciful stories, as Dr. Hagelin was bringing out, but rather higher states of consciousness are lived realities. They're felt experiences. They depend on the breath and the heart rate and the brain waves. And what this does, it allows objective science to objectively measure growth of subjectivity by looking at the change in the physiology. We don't want to collapse these beautiful experiences that we'll be hearing to some chemical functioning somewhere in the brain, because it's not that, but the brain functioning gives us an indication of what is going on. So, what have we found? Transcendental consciousness. The most reliable marker is a style of brain functioning. It's in a frequency band which is 8 to 10 cycles per second, called alpha. This is seen primarily in the front, and then it spreads to the back. And this brain functioning is a result of signals going from the core of the brain, called the thalamus, going up to the surface of the brain, called the cortex, and then going back to the thalamus. It's a self-referral loop. And the self-referral loop oscillates 8 to 10 times per second, and this is what gives rise to the brain functioning. Also in TC, we see slowing of breath, decrease in sympathetic activation, which is your stress response, and increase in parasympathetic response. In terms of cosmic consciousness, the EEG patterns are very clear. When you're reporting the inner experience of wakefulness during sleep, you see the brain functioning of inner wakefulness, this alpha frequency brainwave, along with the EEG of sleep, delta. When you have the inner stability of the self in the midst of dynamic activity, again, you have that EEG frequency of transcending alpha, along with the frequency of focus and control, which is gamma and beta. Now, this integration of the brain signature of meditation with activity we call brain integration. And what's found is brain integration grows from the very first day of your meditation practice. We looked at individuals before they learned TM, and then 2 months later, brain integration increased. That is, there's more of the integration of inner self in their activity. And then brain integration improved again, went higher from 2 months to 6 months practice, and again from 6 to 12 months practice. This is growth of cosmic consciousness. This is growth of enlightenment. And the point is, it's not something that's happening in the future. It's happening right now. It's happening from the very first day of your meditation, and it continues to grow. Now, what we're doing at the moment is we're finishing up data collection with 70 subjects with a range of higher states experiences. And we're looking at it from 2 different angles. One is looking at the relationship of frequency and depth of higher states experiences and brain functioning. We're looking at coherence. Coherence is how the brain is functioning as a whole rather than as a part. We're looking at power, which is what's the level of amplitude in different frequency bands. Looking at cross-frequency coherence. That is, what is the nature of the hierarchical functioning of different parts of the brain. Also, what we're doing is we're comparing growth of higher states with growth of waking state, ego development, emotional intelligence. Do these happen independently, or do they happen sequentially? At the moment, we're gearing up to explore silence. Reason we're doing that is Maharishi in Gita, chapter 6, verse 3, says, when the awareness of the self in cosmic consciousness develops into the awareness of unity, it develops on the level of silence. The whole process is one of transformation of silence. In sleep, the activity of the mind, the activity of the senses is still. And the silence of the self is what remains. So what we're doing is we're trying to secure sleep EEG equipment for the purpose of looking at the experiences of sleep, but also the brain functioning of sleep in some of our current subjects, and also individuals on Purusha and Mother Divine. And we hope in this research to delineate what are these transformations of silence, which occur as one grows from the 5th state cosmic consciousness to the 6th and the 7th state of consciousness. Raja Fagan will be working with us. We'll be looking at genetic expression. So in summary, it's a great responsibility that we have at MIU. We have the knowledge, we have the individuals having the experience to actually document higher states of consciousness and to bring this full range of human potential into the scientific dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fred Travis, for those words and for years of research that have put something as potentially debatable as experiences of higher realities and higher states of consciousness with something that is objectively undeniable when coordinated with the changes in the brain functioning that occur along with the emergence of those experiences, making it all much more real. And I think for a scientific world or material-based world or medical-based world is very important, because the doctors believe and trust and understand brain functioning, know it to be the foundation of conscious experience on one hand, but they are unfamiliar with these experiences. To be able to tie these experiences to something they can sink their teeth into and understand is very helpful. And I think that's why your research, certainly Dr. Nader's research and others, are gaining such prominence now because of the research. It actually started 50 years ago with Dr. Robert Keith Wallace in his pioneering studies in Scientific American and Science and Physiology Today back in 1969, 1970, 71, showing that the meditative state, pure consciousness, indeed has its own state of functioning of the brain, tying, therefore, these experiences, which I think sound perhaps mystical or debatable or someone's own opinion, to something that is demonstrably tied to things that can be observed. Now I'd like to introduce a great expert on all of this wisdom in all of its many applications as well. Again, Dr. Bevan Morris, 36-year president of this institution and revered leader and a global expert on all of this knowledge and all of the programs that emerge, practical applications of this knowledge. Dr. Bevan Morris.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Hagelin. Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, the Maharshi or great seer of the Vedic tradition of India, identified 7 states of consciousness, each with a corresponding state of physiological functioning and a distinct world of experience. We could please show the graphic of the 7 states. So we're all familiar with deep sleep, dreaming, and waking states, 3 relative states. And then there are 4 higher states, which are absolute states of consciousness. And they are transcendental consciousness, the 4th, cosmic consciousness, the 5th, God consciousness, the 6th, and unity consciousness, the 7th. So a definition of these states. The 4th state of consciousness, transcendental consciousness, is experienced during the transcendental meditation technique when the mind transcends even the finest aspect of thought and becomes completely silent and at rest, yet fully awake inside. This is the state of pure consciousness, self-referral consciousness, the state of quiet wakefulness within, where consciousness knows itself alone, and the mind makes direct contact with the field of pure being. Then the 5th state, cosmic consciousness. In cosmic consciousness, the deep silence of transcendental consciousness is never lost, whether one is waking, sleeping, or dreaming. Perpetually established on the platform of transcendental being, life is lived in eternal freedom and is filled with infinite bliss 24 hours a day. Then the 6th state, God consciousness. Maharshi explains that the individual who has risen to cosmic consciousness has unbounded, unlimited love overflowing in all directions for everything. While remaining established in the eternal continuum of transcendental consciousness, the individual in God consciousness overflows in unlimited appreciation of the majesty and glory of God's creation, from its grossest levels to its levels of infinite subtlety, where the light of God is eternally shining. And Maharshi said, such individuals see, yet see the glory of God. They hear, yet hear the music of nature. Speak, yet speak the words of eternal being. Their lives are the streams of cosmic being. And then unity consciousness, the 7th state. In unity consciousness, the whole field of existence, from the gross manifest universe to the infinite subtlety of the light of God, is discovered to be one limitless sea of cosmic being. And the supreme knowledge dawns. I am that. I am that totality that encompasses in its range the infinite activity of the universe and the infinite silence of its source in being. Here is the experience of Aham Brahmasmi. I am the totality. I am Brahm. An individual in unity consciousness lives a life of all possibilities. The individual life stream then is a tidal wave of the eternal ocean of cosmic being. a wave that holds within itself the entire ocean of cosmic life. When many such individuals exist on earth, the world enjoys supreme fortune and a heavenly age dawns. The enlightened who live unity consciousness are the hope of all humanity. Never before has this been so clearly seen as in the life of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, whose whole sublime work is to make unity consciousness the normal experience of everyone. Inspired by his teacher, Gurudev Brahmananda Saraswati, Maharshi offered to the world simple techniques for enlightenment: transcendental meditation and the TM City program, yogic flying, and the group dynamics of consciousness. This is according to the principle of Upanishad, Yuktya cha Guru Dataya. The teacher gives the techniques to the world. All these techniques harness the natural tendency of the mind to go to a field of greater happiness, so that anyone can effortlessly experience higher states of consciousness and enjoy all their benefits. And this, of course, is the topic of Dr. Tony Nader's book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, Simple Answers to the Big Questions in Life, whose message is embodied in two Upanishadic expressions. Neha nanasti kinchana, consciousness is all there is. And jivo brahmaiva na paraha, the individual is Brahm, totality, and nothing else whatsoever. At Maharishi International University, living in unity consciousness is the goal for all the students, for every academic program. We could share experiences corresponding to all these four higher states of consciousness, but here is just one example for now, and that is the experience of bliss in activity. This is from one member of the Maharishi International University Community Invincible America Assembly Program, who had been practicing diligently these great techniques for enlightenment for many, many years. She says, as I was standing at the kitchen counter, slicing warm shortbread before filling it with fresh strawberries and whipped cream, I slipped very innocently into a sweet and different state of consciousness. There was only silence, crystal clear, pure consciousness. There was nothing else but that. No thoughts, no intellect, no ego, no experience of something. It was just that simplest state of awareness, awake within itself. Maharshi has instructed us to, quote, get into it, get into it, get into it. And this experience was the it that he was talking about. The kitchen and the shortcake was still there. The physiology was still there. But I was only experiencing the it. I was that pure being, pure simple awareness. That is myself. It was my home, my abode, from where speech returns. So if time permitting, there would be experiences corresponding not only to the higher states of consciousness, but concerning a very important distinction Maharshi made between number one and number two experience, between number two Dirghatamas and number one Madhuchandas, and also the points Maharshi made about authentication of higher states of consciousness. So back to you, Dr. Hagelin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morris. It's very sweet and alluring to hear these experiences. We've been intellectualizing about them, but when you hear the experiences, you can see the genuineness and the profundity of them, innocently expressed by these people who aren't themselves philosophers. They are simply reporting their innocent and wonderful experience. And yes, it would be fantastic to hear from the experiences you have gathered, also from Dr. Nader, shedding further light on what these experiences are like in each of the states of consciousness. I certainly know that the audience would be fascinated to hear more of that. And many of our audience, and we have 1,160 people registered for this very first of conferences in the world on the subject of consciousness as a solution to the world's pressing problems, a trend that is only going to grow in the future. And many of those are practitioners of transcendental meditation. Would love to hear more of these experiences and perhaps more description of them from Dr. Nader as well, just to enjoy and resonate with their own experiences. So that would be wonderful. And also this interesting point that was raised by Dr. Morris, that even a few individuals established in the highest states of consciousness have such a pervasive, life-nourishing effect that the trends in society, indeed that the whole world, could be profoundly uplifted. And you see evidence of this, of course, in the ancient descriptions of golden ages based upon citizens and rulers both living higher states of consciousness. And we've seen it glimpsed in the research we touched upon a couple of days ago, that even groups of significant size, but not overwhelmingly large groups, even groups experiencing pure consciousness in the context of their meditation practice, the fourth state of consciousness, can be enough to dissolve pervasive societal stress and to create an influence of harmony and unity powerful enough to markedly reduce crime and violence and to solve all manner of other stress-related problems in society. So we've had an empirical taste of the power of significant numbers of people experiencing even the fourth of the 7 states of consciousness, fourth state beyond the 3 states of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. All of that would be fascinating subjects for discussion. And Dr. Nader, having heard from these wonderful experts in this field of higher states, touching upon all aspects of it, practical applications for the individual and society, I'd love to hear your response and reflection on any of these points that caught your imagination, and we'll start the conversation that way. Dr. Nader.
Yes, this is wonderful, and the outcome of this development
Some
on the
microphone,
personal
please.
level. Are we okay, President Hagelin? Is the sound okay?
I'm sorry, I think that sound is not only coming through the hall, it's coming through everywhere, I think. So let's stop that speaker and allow Dr. Nader to continue. I'm sorry, Dr. Nader.
Is it okay now? It's better?
Yes. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, Dr. Nader.
So really, what comes with these experiences is a great sense of fulfillment, because that is the nature of life. Ultimately, reality is one unbounded, pure consciousness, one unbounded field of pure being. And even the entire purpose of life is to grow in the direction of achieving and experiencing reality in its fullness. So life is an adventure of discovery of greater and greater reality, ultimately the discovery of the full truth. And that is why we are all seeking more. We are all seeking more knowledge, more understanding. It's a natural force in life. And the more we know, the more we want to know, and the more we experience also sometimes how much less we have known before and how much more we have to know on the surface level. But looking inward, looking towards the ocean of consciousness, we discover within oneself the totality of reality. And that is being beautifully expressed by our great panelists. This is when we transcend and we realize that infinite unbounded ocean of being that gets stabilized with us in the what has been described by Maharishi as cosmic consciousness, the fifth state of consciousness. And therefore, in that state, we are established in the self, we are anchored in pure being, and anchored in that, knowing the ultimate inner value of who we are, brings to us deep peace, deep strength, deep happiness, and the ability to act from this platform, because we are always acting from the platform of ourself. We only can give what we have. We can only share what we are. If we have sadness, we can give sadness. If we have strength, we can give strength. If we have greater intelligence, we can give greater intelligence. And established in the self and the great being, then we can give more to the others on even the surface level, on the leadership level, on the economy level, on helping others level. And so this personal achievement is an achievement for life. As we have established ourselves in fullness, now we take in all the other aspects also. What used to be thought as the other now is going to be gradually understood as part of myself. And we see the beauty of creation and this glorified state of consciousness, and ultimately the true reality in unity consciousness, which is one unbounded ocean of consciousness. What happens for us is growth in fulfillment, because we have, what is fulfillment? Is to be feeling that nothing is missing. You are full, there is nothing missing. Otherwise, if there is something missing, you're not feeling fulfillment. And that fulfillment is the sense of ultimate happiness, ultimate actually bliss consciousness, which is also considered as, in the Vedic literature, as the nature of life, the nature of being. And therefore, it is from that quality that everything comes, and we ignore it, we don't know it. So what happens is the whole process of evolution of consciousness is a process of regaining memory, actually. Regaining memory of the reality of life. And that is what the paradigm of consciousness that has been brought to light by Maharishi and that has been discussed to some extent in our meetings says, is that it starts from unbounded consciousness that goes through a process of analysis, but in the unmanifest level. And therefore, all possibilities exist in the unmanifest level. In that field of pure being, in that ocean, are already present all the waves, even before we realize them or recognize them, experience them in the manifest world and the manifest reality as the expressions of different objects, different points of experiences. All the dynamics of all that there is, all possibilities that we can experience, that we have never experienced, but we can imagine, that we have never experienced or imagined, but are beyond our imagination, but are field of possibilities, they all exist in the unmanifest already. And the path of life is to unmanifest them, if you like, to not to unmanifest them, to uncover them, to bring them from the unmanifest to the manifest. And so the growth of life is the discovery of what is there in the unmanifest. And the ultimate understanding is the full understanding of the entire dynamics of the unmanifest. Maharishi brings to light that these dynamics are reverberations of the field of being, and these reverberations are available in the sounds of the Veda and Vedic literature, which he calls the constitution of the universe. It is the constitution of the universe because all these dynamics, we call them the laws of nature, interact with each other and are present in the unmanifest field, in an unmanifest, so they're not expressed, they are not open to our senses, our ability to see them, but they are there as a full value. And they can be expressed in different ways. One way is through sound, through the reverberations of sound. Another way is through the reverberation that we see on a grosser level in the physical reality. Another level is the whole universe as an expression of those dynamics. And it seems that our human physiology, our human construct, is also an expression of these realities. They are an expression of the dynamics that happen in the infinite, unbounded, unmanifest level of dynamics in the absolute field of reality, in the field of the ocean of consciousness. It has this dynamics within it. And it seems that our human body has evolved to a point where the dynamics of the laws of nature manifest themselves, and we see them as physical through our eyes, through our feeling, through our touch, but they are actually the unmanifest dynamics manifesting as a physical structure. And that is why all the sages and the great teachings throughout time have said that humans are made in the image of God, that in the Veda, it is described that you are Brahman, as Dr. Morris beautifully expressed, that you are that totality, you are that wholeness, and you have the dynamics of that. So you have the development of the relationship between different factors that allow us to experience totality and wholeness. So humans have that birthright after aeons of evolution that allows them to experience the transcendent, to experience the entire field of being. And that is why in the Vedic tradition, even expressed by Maharishi, says that this human life is very precious. We have a very precious opportunity, and that precious opportunity allows us, through the dynamics that are present within it, if we align with them, to experience infinity and totality. So the growth of higher states of consciousness, it's not something imposed on us as if we have to add something to our true reality. It is actually acknowledging and remembering and getting the true experience of who we are. In the ancient literature and the Bhagavad Gita, when a great warrior has been taught by Krishna on the battlefield, at the end, when he reaches enlightenment, he says, I regained my memory, smriti labda in Sanskrit, which means I now know what I am, what I have been always, but that I have forgotten. So higher states of consciousness is not something imposed on us as an artificial something that has to grow. It is, to the contrary, removing all the artificial things which we call stress, or the obstacles which we also grossly call stress, that have deformed or made the structure of our nervous system, physiology, the entire relationship with the environment disturbed. And that is what preventing us from seeing the true reality of who we are and what everything is. So rising in higher state of consciousness is uncovering the veil of ignorance. It is not trying to discover something that is new. It is actually uncovering that which is there and that we have forgotten, that we are not able to experience. And this is really the dynamics of rising in higher state of consciousness. That is why we call it discovering the self, discovering the true self. There is the small self that we imagine we are, and there is the true self, which we truly are. And that true self is deep within us. It is us, physically, mentally, physiologically. And it's beautiful to hear from Dr. Pearson and Dr. Morris and Dr. Travis their expressions, which all come to that. And for example, when Dr. Travis said, it is not that the nervous system works in a certain way in order to create a higher state of consciousness. It is realigning oneself with the true reality of higher states of consciousness by transcending that is expressed, that is seen as the experience of great brain coherence, etc. So the physiology, of course, it happens together, because you cannot experience higher state of consciousness if the brain doesn't work this way. But by transcending, you align the nervous system, and the nervous system's quality of coherence is a mirror, is an expression of what is happening in the dynamics of consciousness. And so these have happened for a short time in the history of mankind, for people who have given their entire life for a moment of this experience. We hear about saints who first were philosophers or thinkers or skeptics in their lives, as Dr. Pearson describes in his beautiful book, who had moments of revelation. And just these moments, they felt, if I can have such an experience, that's all I want. That's all I want. I want to be in that reality. I want to be in that experience. Nothing else matters. And suddenly they gave their entire life for that. And now we have a technology from the Vedic tradition, an ancient technology that systematically allows us who are sitting in the world, working in the world, which we do not have to leave, which we do not have to abandon. We can stay in it, we can be productive in it, we can embrace it, we can be creative in it, and at the same time experience the true reality of life and share it with others so they can experience it also. And as a group and groups who can do it, we can have the whole world share it, we have our nations share it. That's why on the practical level, very practical level, we call upon those who are capable to come join with us in this wonderful possibility, which has been proven scientifically, as President Hagelin presented beautiful research that can change the trend of time by realigning the individuals and society with the true nature of life. Life does not have to be struggle and strain. There does not necessarily to be divisions. Diversity is part of the beautiful expressions on the surface, but the purpose of life is to rise in happiness and to experience unity. That's how we rise in happiness, by knowing ourselves to be everything. And by creating this in the environment, in our world, we can truly fulfill the goal of this symposium and the goal of all the sages throughout time, that life is lived in happiness and peace. And we have now the technology for that. What is needed is the goodwill of people who would support such large groups. And that's why we invited the rich of the people, the government of the world, the rich of the world, who can actually spare some part of their funds. And this symposium is not about fundraising, but we cannot resist when we talk about offering solutions that we actually say ultimately that the solution is there, the technology is there. What it needs is for it to be applied. And for it to be applied, it needs people who will be able to give few minutes in the morning, few minutes in the evening together in one place to practice these advanced techniques and create the result. So even if it's just for play, if you want to try something and you can afford as a wealthy person 1% of your wealth, you know, if you are like 200 billion and you can give 2 billion, or if together we have the wealthy come together and each gives 1 per 1,000 of their wealth, even for fun, for trying, do the experiment. We've done it, we know the results will be there, but try to see if you can do it on a permanent level and create world peace, because we truly are the embodiment of natural law. All the religions, all the great sages have said that. We have this scientifically through experiments, through research, and we have its effectiveness proven, and we can do it. We really can do it with all those well-wishers of humanity's help and support. Thank you for a wonderful symposium. I took a longer time, but I thought these were problems or issues or solutions rather that need to be highlighted.
Very, very good. Thank you so much for putting it in perspective and of its practical utility, the utility of this whole discussion. Life spontaneously aligned with natural law through the experience of higher states of consciousness. Life spontaneously in the evolutionary flow of natural law as a spontaneous consequence of the experience of higher states of consciousness, from pure consciousness to cosmic consciousness and on. That's a natural consequence. And I can't resist commenting very briefly from the perspective of modern physics, which would say the same thing. The unified field itself is known through its reverberations. It is eternally reverberating within itself, not in an ad hoc or random way, but according to a very precise spectrum, a very precise pattern of internal vibrations, ripples or wavelets within the unified field continuously. But those wavelets, those ripples within the unified field are perceived by us, and indeed are, the elementary particles that make up the universe, the electron and electrons in this room, the quarks and the Higgs bosons and photons in this room. These are just the ripples, the most minute vibrations of the unified field, and everything is made of just that. Everything is made of these fundamental particles, the nuclei, the atoms, the molecules, the organisms, the species. Everything in the universe is made of it, and not just made of it. That was one thing that Dr. Nader said, but more graphically, the very pattern of those vibrations, not just that vibrations make up everything, but the structure and pattern of those vibrations are mirrored everywhere, mirrored in the structure of the DNA, mirrored in the spectrum of elementary particles, as I've mentioned, mirrored in the structure of our human cells, mirrored in our organ systems. And Dr. Tony Nader, in his books, elucidate this incredibly graphically in a most compelling way. And not just even mirrored in the human physiology, and mirrored truly throughout the geography and throughout the geology of the planet and the solar system, but even the large-scale structure of galaxies flung across the far heavens, and the clusters of galaxies, and the filaments that connect those galaxies, and the distribution of dark matter at the scale of cosmology over tens of billions of miles, of light years, tens of billions of light years, on that vastest distance which you look with the telescopes and radio telescopes, what you see is that same structure of the reverberations of the unmanifest ocean of consciousness, the unified field, mirrored perfectly in the structure of creation at the vastest scales and on every scale. So when the enlightened person in unity consciousness sees all of this as that, it is not an imposition, as Dr. Nader was saying, of some, foreign concept upon the human brain. It is simply the realization of the truth of life. It's the opening to the perception and the expansion of consciousness so that one can realize and comprehend the unity of all, the totality of everything, and live that totality. Higher states of consciousness are really truly just a grand awakening to the supreme truth of life, or the supreme awakening, we could say, in the language of the book of Craig Pearson today. We still have a little bit of time, and I'm very keen to hear again from our panelists. Any one of you are free to speak up at this point. We could start with you, Fred, since it's been a while.
Yes, just to reiterate this point, that growth towards higher states of consciousness is waking up to what has already been there. It's not adding anything external, anything artificial, anything new. It's just being aware of what is there. We live in a quantum mechanical reality of self-referral functioning. Vedic science tells us this, physics tells us this, but what do our eyes tell us? Oh, it's a fragmented TV there. It's separate from myself in time and space. And as the physiology is refined through practice of the Vedic technologies, which are mental technologies, transcending TM City program, they're mental technologies, but because mind and body are so connected, as Dr. Nader was bringing out, the body is refined as well, and suddenly you see the world differently. It seems to be magic, but it's simply physiological functioning. And it brings higher states of consciousness out of something which is mystical and magical into just down to earth. It's physiological habituation. It's refining the physiology to enjoy that which is already there. Thank you.
It's wonderful. This is so beautiful. Dr. Hagelin, President Hagelin, I see Father Mejia and Raja Luis as on the gallery. Did we want to maybe
Squeeze that in, and now that we know that Father Mejia has joined us, I really, really am delighted to share his thoughts, his beautifully profound thoughts, coming from our previous conference on education. And let me just read, they require no commentary. The role of an educator, this is from Father Gabriel Mejia, who is an extraordinarily revered man of God, priest, and someone who has tended to the lives and taken care of hundreds of thousands of youth in Colombia who have endured extreme hardship, are extremely disadvantaged, children from war-torn areas, orphaned children, children who've experienced drug addictions and even prison. Father Mejia comments, the role of an educator is a prominent one. The Nobel Prize laureate in literature, Gabriel Mistral, said very beautifully, if you do not love, do not educate. Basically, educators are servants. For an educator, the student is the most important individual that has entered the instruction. He does not depend on us. We, the educator, depend on him, the student. The student does not interrupt our work because he is the object of our work. We are not doing him a favor by serving him. He does us the favor by allowing us to serve him as educators. A student is a person who expresses his concerns, his needs, and anxieties. Our work as educators, with demanding love, consists of listening and accompanying the student in his life project. As educators, we have to look at what is most urgent, opportune, and effective. In our educational centers, we must look for suitable people with convincing conceptions who possess the creativity, the common sense, the vocation, and the determination to make the idea of transformation of people a reality. As educators, we must seek to be coherent between what we think, say, and do. Our coherence as educators induces coherence by resonance. Each person has infinite potential, and therefore each person, each student, we must bow with deep reverence. There is a divine project there. This is everything we do as educators. We do it through our conscience. We do it through our mystique, through our passion, through our commitment. It is the wisdom of righteous human relations. Often we play the role of educators, but sometimes we have not learned the role of servants. This is where we officiate, that service of educating. There are three important aspects of the educator: responsibility, inclusiveness, participation. To serve the needs of learning and human development in the community in a timely and effective manner. To meet the needs of learning and human development in the community and to encourage the determinations in maintaining a participatory approach. To respond is to assume the role in front of the student, which implies love. Without love, there is no responsibility. The real need is recognized by the soul. Our students, children, teenagers are children of need because it is in the need that the soul emerges. The moments of crisis are moments of need, and those moments are spiritual windows open to the soul. Tell me where the children hurt, and I tell you that there lies their maximum opportunity. This is the point of maximum growth. Tell me about their frustration or their pain, and this is not the negative side. It is their positive side from the soul, because it is the point of maximum impact on the personality. Show me the pain of children and young people, and that is a hole that has been opened in the heart. It is an eye that has been opened into their personality. So as educators, healers, we can see the soul of the child. Healers, we can see the soul of children and young people. A good educator is responsible for the soul. I know for sure that my thoughts touch you. It is not only what I say to you, but what I think of you, what touches you and reaches unfailingly to your heart and creates or destroys you. My thoughts as an educator, my emotions touch you. As an educator, I am creating and recreating you. In every relationship with our students, we have to ask ourselves, are you leaving better than when you came to me? If you leave better, our relationship is reinforced. It is constructive. My ripples as an educator and your ripples come together coherently and formed a reinforcing pattern so that you leave better, and I am better. This is very important in the therapeutic art of knowing and feeling. Finally, I believe that love is the imperial medicine for all illnesses and diseases. In loving, we can work miracles. If the child and the young person have a place in your heart, you can really help them. Today, more than ever, we need educators with a sincere sense of compassion and service. This message again from Father Gabriel Mejia, and what a beautiful reflection of the Father Mejia that we all know, and that is so universally revered for his incredible generosity of service to all those hundreds of thousands of people around him who are in such need. So that was the message to the educators of our conference number 2 in the series of 7. We will be sure this message, Father Mejia, makes its way to all the participants in that conference and gets included in these tapes, as in a sense it just was. It is available for educators everywhere. Thank you for that beautiful contribution.
And Father Mejia's, following on his words, wants to give the maximum to every student. That's why he's giving transcendental meditation, and that's why he cherishes it. That's why he is with us and supports us, because he knows what it does. And so we honor him and thank him.
Very much so. The transformation he has achieved through that love and through providing, you could say, a technology of love, a technology for higher states of consciousness, transcendental meditation, has been really the sine qua non, I think, of the success that he has enjoyed and that the people have enjoyed through his great work. The time is now such that I think all of our speakers could make a closing remark. And don't rush too severely, but we are coming towards the end of our time. An amazing conference so far. Thank you very much, Dr. Nader, for that very beautiful exposition on higher states and the importance of higher states. And now back to Fred Travis.
Thank you again. Just to reiterate that higher states is the natural journey that we're all on, and it comes through refining physiological functioning. And the Vedic technologies have given us means to do that. So we can grow up and just realize the world that we live in is really an integrated whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred.
I'd point out that for billions of people in the world today, religion plays a very major role. And when we look at religions around the world, on the surface, they seem so different. They have their own liturgies, their own philosophies, their own ways of speaking about God and the divine, their own people that they honor, their own days that they celebrate, their own beliefs, their own art and architecture and music. They seem so different, and different enough that religion is so often a point of contention. But when you peel back the layers of each wisdom tradition, each faith tradition, each religion, at the core you find the simple message of going within, of turning within. In the book of Luke in the New Testament, Jesus Christ says, "Behold, the kingdom of God is within you." And in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad says, "He who knows himself knows God." In Judaism, the Talmud says, "The highest wisdom is to know yourself." And on like that around the world. We could cite passages like that through all of the world's traditions. So this is the message that comes down to us through all of the great religions, the great philosophical traditions. Look within, dive within, turn within. What's most important in life is to be found within. And rather than being a source of contention and argument and violence sometimes, religion can be a celebration for the beautiful inner life of pure consciousness and of higher states of consciousness, which all the religions were founded to produce in their followers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tom.
Just to mention that here at Maharishi International University is a great center of dedication to higher states of consciousness. And here are a few examples corresponding to the different higher states. First, the fourth state, transcendental consciousness. Today, for a timeless while, there was no today, yesterday, or tomorrow. One moment I was practicing the Transcendental Meditation City program gleefully, and then simply and seamlessly, all there was eternity extending in all directions to infinity. From this timelessness emerged time, and from there creations, many creations, emerge from and then merge back into timelessness, which itself remained eternal and unchanged. And then for cosmic consciousness, there is nothing like sleep for me anymore. Nothing. The body may be asleep, but that is all. The same being that occupies my awareness and activity, being with a big B, in the deep values of meditation, that pure being, pure awareness, that Atma is fully lively at night during which I used to refer to as sleep. But it is not sleep. It is pure wakefulness, pure awakeness, pure awareness. And then for God consciousness, the sixth state, And there is a subtlety to the beauty that can be almost otherworldly. By that I mean there is a soft, subtle radiance that comes with the beauty, and intimacy that comes with the beauty I see. The most mundane field of corn, bordered with trees and tall grass and fences, comes alive as if pure life has been breathed into it. Now I drive through, and there is beauty and bliss, as the subtler values that were always there are more apparent and obvious to me now. Beauty and bliss can be found anywhere and everywhere these days through these eyes of mine. And then unity consciousness. The edge between me and my environment that distinguishes me and separates me from my environment simply has begun to dissolve. To soften and soften until it begins to melt away. Being and self simply starts to be appreciated not only inside, within my individual nature, but also outside in outer nature. When this invisible boundary that the senses have helped to create between my inner world and outer world begins to melt away, immediately I begin to feel greater joy and peace and contentment. And I also wanted to mention that Maharishi had brought out to our university great experts in these advanced technologies of consciousness from the Vedic tradition, a distinction between Dirghatamas, is a Vedic rishi identified with being in the cave of silence, and Madhuchandas, the first seer of the Rig Veda, who experiences that there is infinite dynamism within the field of infinite silence. And that infinite dynamism expresses in the experience in the golden domes here at MIU in the form of brilliant light, self-effulgent light in the silence, or the sound, the roaring sound of the unmanifest, which is the sound of the Veda, the constitution of the universe. Here is an example of that. Lately in program I've been enjoying an experience which I call white silence. It's a very profound level of silence that seems much deeper than that I've enjoyed in the past. And it is always accompanied by white light. Or it may be more accurate to say that it is white light, because then I cannot separate the white from the silence. By profound, I mean it is a silence that nothing could disturb. No noise, and I mean no noise in one's environment, could shake it or even disturb it while you're in it. It is beautiful, exquisite silence. And as I've been enjoying this utterly perfect silence, I have come to realize also an equally profound kind of sparkling dynamism along with the silence. That is to say, the profundity of the silence is matched perfectly and exactly by the liveliness of the dynamism. So this is the experience of Madhuchandas, number one experience, the experience of dynamism in silence. And others comment that what happens ultimately is that there is a blending between the silence and the dynamism so that they can't be ever distinguished. Here is what this person says. This profound silence and dancing dynamism are not two different things blended together. They are not even, in a sense, two different aspects of one thing, though one could say that. Rather, for me, they are experienced as exactly the same thing. At any rate, the experience is utterly delicious and totally captivating, not just because these two opposite values exist together so freely and beautifully, because they do so unimaginably as one thing, one remarkable self-interacting singularity. In respect to these experiences also, Maharishi has advised everyone that they need to be authenticated and that is through the Vedic exhortations. The Veda and Vedic literature are the encyclopedia of higher states of consciousness. Also through the discovery of Dr. Tony Nader that the human physiology is the expression of the Veda and Vedic literature, the sounds of natural law, the constitution of the universe in the unmanifest field, and they need to be confirmed by scientific research, as we've heard from Dr. Travis, confirming the unique state of physiology that is at the basis of them, and finally to be confirmed by what has been said by Dr. Hagelin about the reality of the ultimate discoveries of modern science, one single self-interacting field of which everything is the expression. So Maharshi is very concerned to authenticate also the experiences that are there. Finally, I just mentioned one more. The key thing of all of this is the reality of bliss. When Maharshi began to teach Transcendental Meditation in 1955, he was motivated by the contrast between the bliss that he experienced living in Brahmi Chaitanya, unity consciousness, and the suffering that he saw around him in the world. So he came really just to bring life in bliss in its real existence to everyone in the world, by everyone through education living in unity consciousness. So here is one more experience of that bliss becoming blissful. This fortunate individual is coming home from the Golden Domes here, where he's been practicing his Transcendental Meditation and TM City program, including yogic flying. He says, I went directly home, and in the time to cool my supper, eat, do the dishes, and prepare my lunch for the next day, I experienced a gradual increase in streaming, flowing bliss in my awareness. It started as a trickle and eventually became a cascading torrent. It was beyond description. If Niagara Falls was bliss instead of water, then that was the kind of bliss I was experiencing. As I was brushing my teeth, I thought to myself, am I really going to go to bed with all this going on? I was tired, so I tried it. As I lay in bed with the lights out, there were shimmering lights and unbounded bliss. I realized that I was experiencing bliss. Bliss was flowing through me, and I was made up of bliss. Everything became bliss. I became bliss. It's like I was just bliss. So this is the goal, to have for every student growing up in the world to live this reality. As Dr. Nader said, this is normal reality. It's not abnormal, it's the completely normal reality. As he said, smritir labdha, the realization of Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, regain my memory. This is the way life actually is. We're not hidden by the stress and strain of life in the world. When the purification of the physiology is there, this Niagara Falls of bliss is the destiny of every child, every student, and every human being in the world. And then, as Dr. Hagelin pointed out, it's very clear the whole world is going to enjoy a new golden age of heaven on earth. So thank you, Dr. Hagelin.
Thank you, Dr. Bevan Morris, for a tremendous culmination of a wonderful seminar today. We have had just extraordinary discussions of the scientific, academic, historic, and practical applications of higher states of consciousness. Extremely, extremely edifying and very inspiring in themselves. But to end with this taste of the direct experience of it certainly brings that intellectual understanding into a palpable experience, truly warming the heart, and I hope inspiring all of our listeners and conference participants around the world to dedicate time to this. Of all the things we can dedicate time to develop our skills in this or that area, can develop skills in this or that area. But the totality of life itself, our actual level of consciousness from which we live and experience and accomplish everything for ourselves and for society, those accomplishments and that enjoyment can be infinitely larger if we remember, if the reality dawns in ourselves through higher states of consciousness, and we live daily experiences such as this, living and breathing the scientific reality of the unity of life, living and breathing the bliss of life to bring individual life to a heavenly state, but at the same time, individually and more collectively, bringing the whole world with us into an age that we've been dreaming about, probably, for most of our lives and from generation after generation. That life of enlightenment, that life of harmony and unity and plenty, bounty, health, vitality for everyone is truly within reach. It's not far away because the wellspring of it, the reservoir of it, is within every one of us. And even if the billions of people on Earth don't wake up automatically and begin to develop that experience themselves, as Dr. Nader says, as the research has shown, a relative handful of people, a small subproportion of the population, can basically propel the population forward to higher and higher levels of experience and higher states of consciousness. So every listener of this symposium is vastly more important than perhaps you may think, in that we have so much power and leverage individually and severally to leverage our society into a golden age. And that was Maharshi's real vision. That was the vision beautifully articulated today by Dr. Tony Nader, our conference chair, keynote speaker, reflected in all of the presentations today. And also, I must say, got to say again, beautifully extolled in this book, which despite the fact that it weighs 5 pounds, is a joy to carry and a joy to read. Thank you, all of you, all over the world, for participating in this historic first conference on the role of consciousness in solving the pressing problems of society today. I think we've seen across the different professions how much can be accomplished and how easily it can be accomplished. From that perspective, this has been incredibly inspiring, and I think an eye-opener and an inspiration to everyone throughout the world, the 1,000 or more people who've been connected every day, and the many thousands more who will see this in recorded form and ultimately have a chance to revisit it even more deeply in a future series of conferences of extended length, and where the participation of more participants of global renown will be present, and the audience, therefore, I think also extended even greatly further. Thank you, Dr. Tony Nader, for being the inspiration for this conference, of bringing this critical knowledge of consciousness, the core knowledge of life and core reality of life, out to the public and develop it more fully within ourselves and present it systematically and in a practical way to help guide the destiny of civilization at a time where guidance is warranted, where the needs are numerous, and where the solutions seem to be refreshingly easy, inspiringly easy. Thanks again to all of our speakers and to all those who have connected from all over the world, putting an end to a glorious experience of this week, to repeat it again sometime in the not too distant future on an even grander scale. Good day.
Thanks to you, President Hagelin, for this great organization. You've done marvelously. And congratulations for the university's Golden Jubilee as the celebration go on. Thanks from my side also to all the panelists and all those who have participated in creating and helping in this, Dr. Neil Patterson, Raja Luis, and all the others. It was wonderful to participate.
Thank you very, very much. It's a beautiful close. And I should just mention, Dr. Nader, the video has requested that you could perhaps stay on for a few minutes. That would be just great. And to everyone else, thank you again.